China has unexpectedly started imposing sanctions against the Russian shadow fleet, which Russia uses to illegally trade oil. It turned out that today, in one of China's key ports, Qingdao, they announced that they will no longer accept the Russian shadow fleet for oil unloading. China doesn't openly call these sanctions, but instead tries to present its decision more positively. Mitsui or Pechiy lines will not accept old tankers or those that have changed their International Maritime Organization identification data or have invalid certificates. Well, it sounds interesting, but basically that's exactly it. The port of Qingdao was sanctioned by the United States in August for accepting a tanker that was carrying Iranian oil and had already been sanctioned by the United States. At the same time, there is a gradual decline in Russian oil production. And in the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries plus Cartel, amid increased oil production, they stated that Russia is unable to fulfill even its current oil production commitments to the cartel. That's why some countries are saying they are ready to replace it on the market with their own oil. Overall, things are not going well for the Russian oil industry, and I suggest we discuss this topic in this episode. My name is Pechiy. Before we begin, remember this YouTube channel releases daily news and analytical segments, so you stay updated on all the news. That's why I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel, clicking the bell so you get notifications about new episodes, and I ask you to like and leave a detailed comment under this episode. This really helps a lot with promoting the video on YouTube. So, today, September 29th, unexpected news came from China. The main terminal operators at the Chinese port of Qingdao, which handles about 1/6 of the country's crude oil consumption, will introduce new restrictions on construction. The move is widely seen as targeting ships carrying sanctioned oil from Iran, Russia, and other sensitive suppliers. Experts have already called this a synchronization with Western sanctions against the shadow fleet of Russia and Iran. But China does not state this directly and pretends that the reason for the ban on servicing tankers carrying Iranian and Russian oil is something else. Well, sort of. As officially stated, the measures include a ban on docking for tankers older than 31 years, as well as vessels that have changed their International Maritime Organization identification data or have invalid certificates. In fact, this is a complete list of criteria that fully applies to the entire Russian shadow fleet. These measures take effect November 1 stop. Well, and there's another important nuance that indicates that China, even though they didn't want to, has actually supported the Western sanctions. The thing is, the restrictions at the port of Qingdao were introduced right after the United States imposed sanctions in August against an oil operator located in the Dongjiakou port area in Qingdao, stating that it received Iranian oil transported by a vessel that is already under Washington's sanctions. This has heightened concerns that tighter sanctions could further disrupt crude oil imports into China. That's why diplomats in Beijing have publicly spoken out against these measures. But in the end, they silently accept the rules of the game because it's better to maintain normal oil imports. Well, as Bloomberg reports, the new notice banning the servicing of the shadow fleet was signed by 4 operators of the Huangdao port, which is part of the larger Qingdao port, including the company Qingdao Xihua Crude Oil Terminal, which is jointly owned by the Qingdao Port Administration and a division of Sinopec Group. So why did I list all these names? Because in the end, everything leads back to Sinopec. It's truly a huge company, which you may have already heard of. And after the port operators refuse, the vessel is banned from docking in this area for 1 year. Then the decision is reviewed. Other vessels entering the port of Shandong province will also be assessed under a system that evaluates ships based on their risk profile, which takes into account factors such as age and environmental pollution liability insurance coverage. Tankers with a low rating may also be denied berthing. And the whole point is that once again the shadow fleets of Russia and Iran are made up of those very old vessels that are now banned from entering Chinese ports. Everything is now labeled as an environmental issue, including old ships, insurance risks, and more. In reality, all this aligns with the sanctions, though no one will admit it. The larger port of Qingdao is seen as a major transshipment hub for deliveries of Iranian oil to China as well. And according to the analytics company KPLER, since the beginning of this year, the port has received about 300,000 barrels of crude oil from Iran per day. But that's despite the fact that official data hasn't shown any oil imports from Iran since mid-2022. But it's important to make one very significant clarification here, so that there aren't, any unnecessary illusions. The new measures are expected to have only a limited impact on the overall import of such sensitive crude oil into China. Why is that? The port of Qingdao is already losing its share of crude oil imports to Shandong, dropping from more than 40% of total imports in 2020 to about 20% since 2024, as neighboring ports have expanded their berths for large oil tankers in recent years. So, tankers can go to other ports, and that's why the West should closely monitor the movement of tankers to other Chinese ports, not just Qingdao. The existence of restrictions already says a lot. Besides, it's important to consider one more detail. Oil loaded at Iranian ports is usually transported from the Persian Gulf to Malaysian waters. Or there's another transshipment point where it's transferred from one tanker to another right at sea. Vessels already under United States sanctions are often used on this route. This is how oil is transferred to other tankers, a transshipment scheme that Russia uses as well. That's why it's crucial to monitor where and who is transferring oil from Russia and Iran to other vessels, and how the producer's label gets switched on the oil barrels. Well, barrels, figuratively speaking. But for Russia, the problems don't end there. Recently, there has been a gradual decline in oil production in Russia. Today, more important news has emerged. Russia, along with Algeria, Kazakhstan, and Oman, has faced the inability to significantly increase oil production. At the moment when Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus decided to increase supplies to the global market. According to data from the company KPLER, these countries are already producing almost at the limit of their capabilities. Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus plan to boost production by 547,000 barrels per day in September, plus another 137,000 barrels. The data for these months has not yet been published, but the actual increase in production will likely amount to only half of the target figures. That's why Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus started thinking about what to do with a cartel member like Russia, because it can't fulfill its production commitments. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are able to increase their production several times over, since they have spare capacity. And it seems that Saudi Arabia is ready to push Russia out, quietly, without much noise. Oil production in Saudi Arabia in August was 747,000 barrels per day higher than in March. And it accounted for more than half of the total Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus production growth from April to August. This is according to Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries data. In addition, Iraq is also increasing its oil supplies to the market, which could also push Russia aside. Well, if there were also tariffs and sanctions from Donald Trump, the Russian Federation's economy would really take a hit. Well, if not fatal, then definitely near fatal. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.